Hey folks, I'm not going to waste your time with a long intro, so let's dive right in. Here's 30 minutes of hockey firsts. We'll kick things off with Frank Beaton, who has the distinction of being the first, and to the best of my knowledge, only hockey player to be arrested in between periods of a pro hockey game. On February 19, 1978, between the first and second periods of a WHA game between the Cincinnati Stingers and the visiting Birmingham Bulls, police forced their way into the Bulls dressing room with a warrant for the arrest of Frank Seldom Beaton. The Bulls enforcer was led away in handcuffs, arrested on a 2-year-old warrant, charging him with assault when he'd broken the cheekbone of a gas station attendant after the man accidentally spilled gasoline on his Corvette. To dispel notions that the Stingers had arranged for the cops to nail Beaton at the game, opposing coach Jacques Demers posted Beaton's $2,000 bond, telling the media, "We stick together when it comes to things like this." In an unrelated bit of Frank Beaton trivia, he was famously traded in 1982 by the Islanders to the North Stars in exchange for a steak dinner, another NHL first. Moving from one arrest to another, former Rangers winger Don "Murder" Murdoch has the distinction of being the first NHL player suspended for the possession of illegal drugs. Murdoch broke into the league in 1976 as the right winger on the Rangers Mafia line, with Phil Esposito and Don Maloney. But the 21-year-old's bright future took a dark turn in the summer of 1977, when he was caught with 4.8 grams of cocaine stashed in his socks during a routine customs search at the Toronto airport. He avoided jail time, but was initially suspended for the entirety of the 1978-79 season, before the NHL relented and reinstated him after 40 games. Murdoch struggled to regain peak form, and his career soon fizzled out. Through the years, the NHL has slowly improved its resources for players struggling with drugs and mental health issues, beginning with the establishment of the Players Assistance Program in 1996. 31 years before Murdoch made headlines for possessing cocaine, Leafs defenseman Babe Pratt was the first player to get caught gambling on NHL games in 1946, just 2 years after he won the Hart Trophy as league MVP. Pratt was initially suspended for life, but after an appeal, the league backtracked and reinstated the popular Leafs veteran just 15 days later. The NHL had its second gambling scandal in 1948, but this time they weren't so lenient. When the Bruins' Don Gallinger and the Rangers' Billy Taylor appeared on bookies' client lists during a police investigation into racketeering, NHL President Clarence Campbell suspended them for life. Everybody's familiar with the famous photo of Sidney Crosby sleeping with the Stanley Cup, and many players have followed suit in recent years. But long before Crosby did it in 2009, Brian Trottier was the first player to spend the night with the cup way back in 1980. There's no photographic evidence of the event, but apparently the Conn Smythe winner was able to pull some strings and arrange a night with Lord Stanley. According to Trottier, he wanted to wake up and find the cup beside him, just to make sure that winning it wasn't a dream. Of course, the Stanley Cup has been on all kinds of adventures over the years, spending time in swimming pools, on dog sleds, and being carted all around the world. But one of my favorite Stanley Cup firsts comes courtesy of Mark Messier, who has the distinction of being the first player to take the Stanley Cup to a strip club. When the Oilers won in 1987, Mess took the cup to the Forum Inn, a strip joint near Edmonton's Northlands Coliseum, and encouraged the strippers to get up close and personal with Lord Stanley. Messier and Lord Stanley returned to the strip club scene when the Rangers won in 1994, this time hitting Scores Gentlemen's Club in Manhattan, which was owned by Michael Blutrick, a mob informant whose information to the feds helped put away John Gotti Jr. and others. Returning to more conventional celebrations, it's hard to believe, but players didn't always skate around the ice with the cup for a victory lap. It wasn't until the Red Wings won the cup at home in 1950 that Ted Lindsay began a new playoff tradition. Upon being handed the cup by Captain Sid Abel, he hoisted it towards the Olympia rafters and skated along the board so everyone could see it up close.
He won the Art Ross Trophy in 1949-50, leading the Red Wings to a Stanley Cup victory that season, when he became the first player to hoist the cup and skate with it.
I just saw the cup sitting there, so I just went over and picked it up, and I took it to the people on the boards, went around the boards. I wasn't starting a tradition. I was taking care of my fans.
Each year when the Hall of Fame selections are announced, a large contingent of hockey fans express outrage at the ongoing omission of Alex Mogilny. He deserves to be there for his on-ice play alone, but he also deserves to be there for his historic significance as the first player to defect from the Soviet Union. Considered the future of Russian hockey at 20 years old, Mogilny's defection was a meticulously planned operation fraught with risk and uncertainty. At the 1989 World Championships in Sweden, he made his bold move with the help of agents and representatives of the Buffalo Sabres. Mogilny slipped away from his team hotel and sought asylum in the United States. It was a dramatic escape from the watchful eyes of the Soviet regime after years of military service with the Central Red Army, and came with a whirlwind of media attention, political scrutiny, and the emotional burden of leaving his family behind. Mogilny's defection and success in the NHL paved the way for others like Sergei Fedorov, Pavel Bure, and Igor Larionov to join the NHL. Another historic first came in 1958, when Willie O'Ree broke hockey's color barrier by becoming the first black NHL player as a member of the Boston Bruins. A victim of racial abuse from both opposing players and fans, O'Ree played his first NHL game on January 18, 1958 against the Montreal Canadiens. O'Ree finished his brief NHL career with 14 points in 61 games, but was one of the best and most popular players in the Western Hockey League between 1962 and 1974. Registering 328 goals and 639 points in 785 games during stints with the Los Angeles Blades and the San Diego Gulls. While we often use hockey as an escape from reality, sometimes reality takes priority, as was the case on December 9, 1941, when a clash between the Bruins and Blackhawks was delayed, while President Roosevelt announced to the nation that the United States had declared war on Japan, marking the first time that a hockey game was delayed by an announcement of war. More than 10,000 fans soberly listened to the 28-minute radio broadcast as players from both teams sat on their respective benches. Another time reality took precedence over hockey was in January of 1968, when Bill Masterton tragically became the first, and to date only NHL player to die as a result of an on-ice injury. Masterton suffered a severe internal brain injury during the first period of Minnesota's January 13, 1968 game against the Oakland Seals at the Met Center. He carried the puck up the ice at full speed, passing it off as two Seals defensemen converged on him. Masterton was knocked backward in the resulting collision and landed on his head, and like most players of his era, he wasn't wearing a helmet. 30 hours after his fall, Masterton died without ever regaining consciousness, with his parents, brother, wife, and 2 children at his side. Some players started wearing helmets following Masterton's death, but adoption was slow, and it was 11 years before the NHL finally mandated the use of helmets by all players entering the league, beginning in 1979-80. The Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy was created in 1968, and is presented annually to the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. One of the most unique events a fan can hope to see when they attend a hockey game is a goalie goal. On November 28, 1979, Billy Smith was the first goalie credited with an NHL goal after an errant pass by Colorado Rocky Rob Ramage ended up in his own net. The net had been vacated on a delayed penalty to the Islanders, and after Smith stopped the puck, Ramage picked it up and fed a blind pass back to the point, only to have the puck slide the length of the ice and into his own net. It took 8 more years for the first goalie to shoot and score a goal, when the Flyers' Ron Hextall accomplished the feat against the Bruins. Hextall was known for his excellent puck handling abilities, and worked on his coast-to-coast shot in practice. There's been a grand total of 19 goalie goals in NHL history, with Evgeny Nabokov scoring the first goalie power play goal, Marty Brodeur scoring the first goalie game-winning goal, and Alex Nedeljkovic scoring the most recent goalie goal in last week's win over the Sabres. Nedeljkovic's goal is particularly significant because he also registered an assist, making him the first goalie ever to have a goal and an assist in an NHL game. Moving from one goalie first to another, it's a common misconception that Jacques Plante was the first goalie to ever wear a mask. But that distinction actually belongs to Clint Benedict, who tried out a crude leather model for a couple of games after suffering a broken cheekbone in January of 1930. It didn't last long though, and he ultimately gave it up because it obscured his vision on low shots. It wasn't until 1959 that Jacques Plante became the first goalie to wear a mask full-time. On November 1st, in a game against the New York Rangers, Plante was struck in the face by a shot from Andy Bathgate. He'd previously worn his mask in practice, but head coach Toe Blake refused to allow him to wear it in a game, fearing it would inhibit his vision. After being stitched up, Plante gave Blake an ultimatum, refusing to go back out on the ice without the mask. Blake obliged, and Plante donned his iconic homemade fiberglass mask for the first time. As a side note, Andy Brown has the distinction of being the last NHL goalie to play without a mask, with his final NHL game coming on April 7, 1974 in a 6-3 Penguins loss to the Atlanta Flames. Through the years, masks have become a way for goalies to express themselves, but it took them a while to start decorating their masks, with Bruins goalie Jerry Cheevers having the distinction of being the first to wear a painted mask. Cheevers was inspired to create his distinctive stitch pattern mask when a puck hit him in the face during practice. Never one to miss an opportunity to skip out of practice, Cheevers went to the dressing room, cracked a beer, and lit a cigarette. Bruins coach Harry Sinden went to investigate and ordered Cheevers to get back on the ice. But before Cheevers went back out, Bruins trainer John Frosty Forrestal drew a stitch mark on his mask, which amused the team. From that day forward, Cheevers drew stitches on the mask every time he got hit in the face. It became a symbol for the number of times he would have been cut, and he estimates his mask saved him from over 150 real stitches. Moving from one innovation to another, let's talk about Boom Boom Geoffrion, the first player to popularize the slap shot. He probably wasn't the first to use it, but he has the distinction of being the first to make the shot famous, hence his iconic nickname. In his biography called Boom Boom, the Habs legend says he developed his slapper in junior hockey. One day, a sports writer named Charlie Bois watched Geoffrion as he took big windups and fired away at the net in an empty arena. When Geoffrion missed the net, there would be the crack of the puck hitting his stick blade, then another crack when the rubber bounced off the backboards. To Bois, the twin cracks sounded like two booms, and he told Geoffrion he had a new nickname for him. Boom Boom finished his career with 393 goals, but one can't help wondering how many goals he would have scored if he used a curved stick. Pre-curved sticks didn't become popular until the mid-1960s, thanks to players like Stan Mikita and Bobby Hull. But hockey historians agree that Andy Bathgate was the first player to use a curved blade on a consistent basis in the late 1950s. Bathgate began experimenting with curving his own sticks as a kid and refined the technique after he turned pro. He'd heat up the blades with hot water, which would allow him to bend them. He'd then put them in the toilet stall door jamb and leave them overnight. After he got the desired curve, he'd add fiberglass to his blades to prevent them from straightening out, another hockey first. Another major technological innovation was the Zamboni, which was used to flood the ice for an NHL game for the first time on March 10, 1955, in a game between the Habs and Leafs at the Montreal Forum. The famous ice resurfacer was invented in the mid-1940s by Frank Zamboni, a rink attendant at Hollywood's Paramount Studios. His idea for a motorized ice cleaner caught the attention of legendary figure skater Sonia Henne, and with her support, he was able to build a prototype. Before the Zamboni, NHL rinks were cleaned and flooded between periods by workers using shovels and barrels of water. Moving into the modern realm for a moment, Auston Matthews made history on October 12, 2016, by becoming the first rookie in NHL history to score 4 goals in his NHL debut. There's a bit of a caveat, since according to the NHL record book, both Joe Malone of the Montreal Canadiens and Harry Hyland of the Montreal Wanderers scored 5 goals in their first NHL game, and Reg Noble scored 4 goals in his first NHL game. But all of those goals happened on December 19, 1917, the first night of the newly formed National Hockey League, and all 3 players had previously played professionally in the National Hockey Association, which was the direct predecessor of the NHL, so they weren't really rookies. So as far as I'm concerned, Matthews is the first and so far only player to score 4 goals in his NHL debut, and I think most stat heads would agree. Sticking with the Leafs, let's talk about Daryl Sittler, the first and only player to register 10 points in one game, when the Leafs captain busted loose for 6 goals and 4 assists against Bruins rookie goalie Dave Reese in an 11-4 victory on February 7, 1976. No other player has recorded more than 8 points in a single game, with Lemieux doing it 3 times, including once in a playoff game, Gretzky doing it twice, and Sam Gagner doing it most recently, with 4 goals and 4 assists in an 8-4 Oilers win over the Blackhawks on February 2, 2012. Moving from big point totals to big dollar values, let's talk million-dollar contracts. The first player to sign $1 million contract was Bobby Orr in 1971, when he inked a 5-year, $200,000 a year contract with the Bruins prior to the 1971-72 season. Calculated over the duration of the deal, it made Orr the game's first $1 million man. But when talking about the history of $1 million contracts, the first name that comes to mind for me is Bobby Hull, the first player to earn $1 million in one season. Hull gave the World Hockey Association instant credibility when in 1972, he signed a $2.75 million 10-year contract with the Jets. The deal included a $1 million signing bonus, which made the Golden Jet an instant millionaire and opened the floodgates to escalating salaries. A lesser-known fact is that a couple weeks before Bobby Hull jumped to the WHA, Bruins center Derek Sanderson inked a 5-year, $2.65 million contract with the Philadelphia Blazers. It reportedly made him the highest paid athlete in North America, quite an upgrade considering Sanderson was making less than $15,000 a year with Boston. Unlike Hull's contract with the Jets, Sanderson's deal was a bust, and he never collected on his millions. Out of shape and disinterested, he played just 8 games with Philadelphia before being injured. By the season's midpoint, Sanderson and the Blazers agreed to part ways, and he returned to the Bruins. Jumping from one colorful character to another, the bombastic Don Cherry taped his first segment of Coach's Corner in 1980 with co-host Dave Hodge on Hockey Night in Canada, not long after being fired as the head coach of the Colorado Rockies. Cherry's straight-talking style struck a chord with hockey fans, although he often got himself in hot water. Like in January of 2004, when he said that players who wore visors were more likely to commit high-sticking infractions, and that most of the guys who wore them were Europeans and French guys. The statement triggered an investigation by the Federal Official Languages Commissioner and protests by French Canadians, and resulted in CBC imposing a 7-second delay on Hockey Night in Canada. But that and incidents like it were just a blip on the radar until November of 2019, when Cherry complained about immigrants who didn't wear poppies.
You people love, they come here, whatever it is, you love our way of life, you love our milk and honey. At least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that. These guys pay for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. These guys paid the biggest price.
The incident blew up, with Ron MacLean throwing his partner under the bus by apologizing for not challenging Cherry and calling the comments hurtful, discriminatory, and flat out wrong. Cherry stood by his remarks and refused to apologize, which resulted in Rogers forcing him to step down. Bobby Orr and Nazem Kadri came to Cherry's defense, along with many Canadian hockey fans, but there was no turning back, as Cherry was unwilling to accept Sportsnet's conditions for his return. Moving from one broadcasting legend to another, let's talk about Foster Hewitt, who was the voice of Canadian hockey for 5 decades. Hewitt coined the phrase "he shoots, he scores," and used his signature goal call on his first hockey radio broadcast on March 22, 1923, in a playoff game between intermediate teams from Toronto and Kitchener at Toronto's 9,000-seat Mutual Arena.
From the face-off, the puck is still in the Montreal zone. Lamoureux rolls it out on the left side. It's picked up by Maggio. Maggio trying to come in on. He does. Loose. He shoots. He scores! Maggio picked up the loose puck from the corner on a long pass and drove it into the net for Canadians.
Hewitt described the action from a glass booth in the penalty box area for station CFCA. The arrangement was less than ideal, as the glass in the tiny booth kept fogging up and obscuring the skinny 20-year-old broadcaster's view. Another broadcasting first came at the 1996 NHL All-Star Game, when Fox debuted the polarizing Foxtrax glowing puck. Foxtrax was an augmented reality system that used special pucks with shock sensors and infrared emitters. These pucks were then read by computer systems to generate the glowing puck. The modified puck was cut in half in order to embed the emitters and sensors. The halves of the puck were then bound back together using an epoxy. They were engineered to have the same weight and balance as a regular NHL puck, but some players felt that the Foxtrax puck responded differently. During broadcasts, the infrared pulses emitted by the modified pucks were detected by special cameras and transmitted to a production trailer nicknamed the Puck Truck, which contained the computer systems used to add the glow. Producers highlighted the puck with a blue glow, and blue tails were added to low-velocity shots and passes. When the puck moved faster than 70 miles per hour, a red tail was added. Many serious hockey fans were offended by the gimmick, but some people felt it helped them follow the puck. Despite Fox's efforts, the concept never really caught on, and the use of the glow pucks was abandoned before the 1998-99 season. Sports Illustrated had been in business for 2 years before a hockey player graced its cover in January of 1956. The honor didn't go to Gordie Howe or Maurice Richard, who were the NHL's biggest stars at the time, but instead to the 24-year-old Jean Beliveau, who won the first and only Art Ross trophy of his career in 1955-56. Beliveau finished the season with 47 goals and 88 points in 70 games, and also took home the first of his 2 career Hart trophies. He was also outstanding in the playoffs, registering 12 goals and 19 points in 10 games, en route to winning the first of 10 career Stanley Cups. In modern hockey, it goes without saying that the trailing team will pull their goalie for an extra attacker late in a close game, but that wasn't always the case. It wasn't until 1931 when Bruins coach Art Ross pulled Tiny Thompson for an extra attacker in the last minute of play in Game 2 of the semifinals against the Habs. The amazing maneuver, as the papers dubbed it, didn't pay off as the Canadiens held on to defeat the Bruins 1-0. The Habs went on to win the series in overtime of Game 5 and ultimately defeated the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup Finals. Somewhat surprisingly, it wasn't until 27 years later that Bruins head coach Milt Schmidt became the first coach to pull his goalie for an extra attacker during a delayed penalty. In a move that's become standard hockey strategy, Schmidt pulled netminder Don Simmons in favor of forward Bronco Horvath when referee John Ashley signaled a delayed penalty against the Red Wings. Another major coaching innovation came courtesy of Roger Neilson, who was the first coach to use video as a teaching tool while coaching the Leafs during the 1977-78 season. Neilson was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2002 and was best known for his perpetually worried expression, unruly hair, vibrant ties, and pioneering use of game film, an innovation that earned him the nickname Captain Video. Neilson began experimenting with video while coaching junior hockey with the Peterborough Petes of the OHA, and when the Leafs hired him, he brought his AV equipment with him. Another iconic Roger Neilson moment came in the 1982 playoffs. It was late in the third period of Game 2 of the conference finals between Neilson's Canucks and the Blackhawks at Chicago Stadium, and referee Bob Myers had given Vancouver a series of questionable penalties to tilt the game in Chicago's favor. In protest, Neilson put a white towel on the end of a stick and raised it aloft in mock surrender. His move was copied by other Canucks players, and when the team returned home for Game 3, frenzied fans waved thousands of white towels. The Canucks went on to win the series in 5, earning a berth in the Stanley Cup Finals where they were swept by the Islanders. Towel power has become an iconic playoff tradition, and we have Roger Neilson and Canucks fans to thank for that. Outdoor games have become an annual tradition and are pulled off without a hitch at events like the Winter Classic. But the first ever NHL outdoor game didn't go quite so smoothly. The year was 1991 and the setting was Las Vegas, Nevada. In a bizarre promotional venture, the Kings and Rangers played a preseason evening game at an outdoor rink set up in the parking lot of Caesars Palace. The temperature hovered around 29 degrees Celsius with 28% humidity for the desert duel. Besides the slushy ice, the major hazard was grasshoppers. Attracted by the lights, the winged insects kept falling onto the rink. Gretzky's Kings won the game 5-2, backstopped by Kelly Hrudey, who was the first goalie to play a game with a camera mounted on his mask. The game also featured the NHL's first outdoor fight. After the game, the players had to walk through the crowded casino in their robes to return to their rooms and shower. Bobby Orr is the greatest defenseman in NHL history, and he has plenty of firsts to his name, including the first and only D-man to win the Art Ross Trophy, which he did twice. But while researching this video, I learned that he's also the first player to have a Stanley Cup ring taken into outer space. One of Orr's game-worn Bruins jerseys and one of his 2 Stanley Cup rings were among the mementos that blasted off with Canadian astronaut Robert Thirsk on the Space Shuttle Columbia in June of 1996. Although the two men had never met, Thirsk admitted that Orr had always been his personal hero. The astronaut personally called the hockey legend to ask if he could take something of his into orbit, hoping that Orr might send something trivial. He was amazed when a package arrived in the mail bearing Orr's diamond-studded 1970 Stanley Cup ring with the famous number 4 engraved on it. Coming back down to earth, there's been a lot of lousy teams with terrible records in NHL history, but there's only 2 teams with the distinction of losing 70 games in a single season, and they both did it in the same season. Ottawa Senators fans who were around in 1992-93 will shake their heads at the mention of that season's 70 torturous losses. But there's a silver lining for Sens fans, because their team didn't lose their 70th game until April 13th, which was 5 days after the San Jose Sharks lost their 70th game of the season on April 8th. In the end, the teams tied for last place with 24 points, with the Sharks taking the prize for the most single-season losses in NHL history with 71 to the Senators' 70. Going from the depths of despair to the pinnacle of the game, let's talk about the 1983 New York Islanders, who had a heck of a good time touring around the country with the Stanley Cup and achieving a couple of hockey firsts. Their first stop was the David Letterman Show, where Dennis Potvin, Brian Trottier, and a few other Islanders became the first players to take the cup on late-night TV. After chatting with the iconic host, they left the cup in the second guest chair, where it remained while Letterman chatted with Johnny Winter and Rita Mae Brown. A few days later, the Islanders became the first team to take the Stanley Cup to the White House, where they met with President Ronald Reagan. In recent years, the NHL Global Series has become an annual event, with NHL teams playing regular season games in places like Stockholm, Prague, and Berlin. But it was nearly 30 years ago, in October of 1997, that the Canucks and Mighty Ducks played the first regular season games outside North America at the Yoyogi National Gymnasium in Tokyo, Japan. The teams played a 2-game series to help promote the participation of NHL players at the 1998 Winter Olympics. The team split the series, with Scott Walker of the Canucks scoring the first official NHL goal outside of North America. Big-time celebrities have also traveled to watch NHL games, including Queen Elizabeth II. Back in October of 1951, when she was still Princess Elizabeth, the Leafs and Blackhawks played an abbreviated one-period exhibition game at Maple Leaf Gardens, exclusively for the Princess and the Duke of Edinburgh. A few hours later, the same two teams took to the ice for their real season opener, which Chicago won 3-1. 51 years after that, in a royal first, Elizabeth became the first queen to drop the ceremonial puck for a preseason game between the Canucks and Sharks. After completing her duties, Queen Elizabeth retired to a private box where she watched the first period with Wayne Gretzky. The Great One said the Queen was curious about why penalties were called and was impressed by the goalies and how quick they were. From British royalty to baseball royalty, Babe Ruth attended his first NHL game on November 15, 1927, a showdown between the Blackhawks and Bruins at the Boston Garden. The game was a battle, featuring big hits, flailing elbows, and 6 fights. After the game, Ruth reportedly said, "Never saw anything like it. Those fellows wanted to kill one another. Thank God I'm in baseball. It's so peaceful and quiet." The closest thing the United States has to royalty is the president, and it took a while for a sitting president to make it out to an NHL game. The first to do so was Bill Clinton, who attended Game 2 of the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals between the Capitals and Sabres. Clinton watched the game from Caps owner Abe Poland's luxury suite and was impressed by the speed of the game. In a between-periods interview with ESPN, Clinton noted that hockey was a much more exciting spectacle live than it was on TV. Hockey skates are usually black, but one team felt the need to break with tradition and paint their skates white. Prior to the 1970-71 season, Charles O'Finley, the flamboyant and eccentric owner of the Oakland Athletics, purchased the Oakland Seals and decided to glam things up. He renamed the team the Bay Area Seals for 2 games, before settling on the California Golden Seals. As part of the rebrand, he changed the Seals uniforms to green and gold, and had all the players' skates painted white, to match the shoes worn by the A's. The fashion-forward decision didn't take into account the realities of playing hockey, and the skates had to be repeatedly painted to cover up scuff marks. By the end of the season, the players joked that all the layers of paint were weighing them down. Clearly not all new ideas are good ideas, and a couple of teams have lost their way when it comes to hockey pants. For the first month of the Washington Capitals' inaugural season, the Caps wore white pants with red jerseys for road games, making them the first NHL team to wear white hockey pants. It turns out there's a reason teams don't wear white pants, because they turn see-through when they get wet. The Caps' white pants didn't last long, and they switched to wearing blue pants on the road. So we've established that white doesn't work for skates or pants. But there was one piece of equipment that failed in every color. It's time to talk about Cooperalls. The long pants were first adopted by the OHL in the late 70s, and were tested in training camps by a few NHL teams, including the Jets and Nordiques. Neither of those teams switched to the Cooperalls, because playing NHL hockey in glorified track pants is ridiculous. But the Philadelphia Flyers disagreed, and became the first NHL team to wear long pants in 1981-82. The pants they went with weren't technically Cooperalls, but a similar style of long pants called the Pro Pack, which were manufactured by CCM. Team personnel felt the Pro Pack pants would help create a faster, more streamlined uniform with lighter padding. Whether the long pants made the Flyers more competitive is debatable, but they definitely made them slide faster into the boards. Players also complained that the long pants were too hot. After the Hartford Whalers copied the innovation in 1982-83, the NHL said enough and banned long pants. Over the years, NHL games have been cancelled or delayed for a variety of reasons. Let's talk about some memorable firsts. On May 24, 1988, a transformer blew at the Boston Garden at 16:37 of the second period of Game 4 of the finals between the Bruins and Oilers, with the score tied 3-3. Despite the technicians' best efforts, they couldn't restore power. The game was ruled null and void, though the players' stats were still counted. When the game was replayed 2 days later in Edmonton, the Oilers won 6-3, earning them the distinction of being the first team to sweep the Stanley Cup Finals in 5 games. Just over 8 years later, the Bruins had another game cancelled on account of an unexpected incident. On November 16, 1996, the huge 8-sided scoreboard at Buffalo's Marine Midland Arena plummeted to the ice with a tremendous crash when a cable snapped during a maintenance check. The accident happened just 90 minutes after the Bruins had finished their morning skate, and luckily nobody was injured. Rainouts are normally associated with baseball, but on March 10, 1995, a game between the Sharks and Red Wings was postponed when heavy rains caused the Guadalupe River to overflow its banks. All the roads leading to the Compaq Center were turned into rivers, and nobody could get to the game. Well, it looks like we've just about reached the 30-minute mark. Thanks for tuning in. Leave a comment about any of the topics discussed in this video, or your personal favorite hockey firsts, and let me know if you'd like me to make a part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and support the channel by hitting the subscribe button for more hockey history.